Hi everyone, I am Petra. I am a life coach and an advocate for survivors of narcissistic and emotional abuse. Welcome back. It's been a while again. I do apologize. There's just been, so much work coming in. I'm very grateful to you. Thank you. But this keeps me from making more videos. I just don't have the time really. And I love making the videos. So I try and get some time in to do that. So please bear with me if it's taking a bit too long. Same as with the emails, I don't respond straight away. There's just, there's so many hours in the day. And if you have had a delay in getting a response to your email, then I do apologize. I'm doing everything that I can to get those emails answered. So thank you once again. To just bring up the subject for today, PTSD. Now, the question often arises, do I have PTSD? How do I know if I have it? How do I know if I'm not just going crazy? Bottom line is, every single one of us who has been subjected to narcissistic and emotional abuse has some form of PTSD. And the severity of it is, of course, dependent on whether you have had that support network around you, whether there have been family and friends. If you have not had family and friends around you who support you because they themselves are toxic, then the severity of your PTSD will be even greater, and in some cases also complex PTSD. So, small example, when I left the relationship with my narcissistic lover years ago, the very first boyfriend I had, I did not have that support network. Of course, I had family and friends around me, but I myself did not know what I was really going through. It was just very extreme, the amount of stress that I was going through, and learning how to cope, even though it was, of course, better for me to leave that toxic relationship. But I really didn't know what was going on. I didn't realize why I was having all this chaos in my mind. And I didn't speak about it to friends and family because I didn't understand it. So all they heard were the bad stories, of course, but they didn't put two and two together. I didn't put two and two together. So I must say that I did not have that support that I really needed to get through it. And that resulted in me dealing with stress for about 4 years after the relationship broke up. And that was over 21 years ago. So now, with the toxic friendships that I've had with women, now I understand what I went through then. And the last relationship or friendship that I went through with a toxic woman was something that I could, the PTSD I could relate to. I knew that there was a label for that there was a name for that. And that is how I relayed all my stories in depth, the way I was feeling, the way it affected my home life. I was able to discuss that with family and friends, and of course with my husband, who is the adult child of narcissistic abuse. So I think because this time around, where I was able to voice that, verbalize it, and speak through it with others, that is what got me through it in a much lesser amount of time. So really within the first year, I had recovered from that last toxic friendship. So it does depend, the severity of your PTSD does depend on whether or not you have that support network around you. So to just come back to the question that is so often posed, do I have PTSD? There are very many different traits to know if you have it. And of course, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot diagnose anyone with PTSD, but I do know that it is a very common result of narcissistic abuse. This is something we all go through. So a few traits that you might be able to relate to is the endless thought patterns, relaying experiences in your head, what the toxic person said to you, what they did to you, how you responded to that, the feeling that you have. This is the continuous train of thought in our minds, in our bodies. It disturbs our sleep. We have trouble sleeping. We have trouble getting up. We don't feel energized when we get up in the morning. This has, of course, got to do with the endless train of thought, because don't forget that the way you think and the amount of thoughts that you have can wear you down, particularly when they are not productive thoughts, when they are not positive thoughts. They can drain you of every single bit of energy. And it's also, you know, when you have been the child of narcissistic abuse, then you tend to overanalyze certain things. You overanalyze situations. You overanalyze your response to those situations when going through abuse. You overanalyze your own behavior. So every little thing is scrutinized, is taken apart in your brain and is looked at. And that this is what takes up most of your day. So this is again where the sleep, lack of sleep comes in. And in some sad cases, you even develop a sleeping disorder. Another thing that is tied to that is the anxiety and depression. You know, people who have come out of very toxic relationships, especially adults of narcissistic abuse, adult children of narcissistic abuse, you develop a form of anxiety. You are hypervigilant. Any little sound will get you going, you will be startled by the sound. I still see that with my husband, you know, if a door slams unexpectedly, or if there is a sudden movement, he will be very startled by this. So this is all part of you having, as I said in a previous video, is where you have been under emotional attack. Your nervous system has been attacked. And this is why you can really see it as your nervous system being very raw. And because it is very raw, it will also be very sensitive to the slightest touch, the slightest emotion, the slightest sound will send you into anxiety, panic, or just being terribly startled. Another thing, another trait of PTSD is the flight mechanism. So when again, I can, you know, using my husband as an example, he's closest to home, so I can use that as a good example, is that when you are confronted with an emotional situation, whether that is in your family, whether that is with your children, in whatever emotional situation, you tend to shut down. Now, this is the flight mechanism. So you will just shut down your emotions, and you will not know how to respond to an emotional situation, so you will take flight. Now, taking flight, you can do in very many different ways. You can shut down, you can get into a book and just shut out the rest of the world around you. Seclude yourself, go off into a room and close the door, leave the house, whatever that is. And also the poker face, that is also shutting down. So this is where you do not know how to deal with emotions. And again, this stems from childhood, where you have never been taught by the toxic parent how to validate those emotions, how to speak about them, how to speak your opinion. So in short, you have never been taught who you are, what your identity is. And this is why you have so much trouble connecting to your own emotions, and also in some cases connecting to the emotions of others. That's not to say that you don't have empathy. You do have empathy, you just show it in a very clumsy way sometimes, that the message doesn't come across to the other person. You know, as I said in a previous video where I came downstairs in this little sexy dress, and I said to my husband, "What do you think?" And he said, "You look very decent," or "You look very nice." And that was not the answer that I was wanting. He meant well, but he didn't use the words that I wanted to hear. So this is where, you know, it's not that there's no empathy, and that there's not that you don't recognize that the person is looking for a compliment. It's just that you don't know how to word it. You don't know how to give those compliments. And the same goes with receiving. This is another form of PTSD and also plays into when you have been raised by toxic parents, is that you will not know how to receive a compliment, and you will not know how to receive help. You will always be willing to give the help to someone else, but you have a lot of trouble receiving that help. Having PTSD is also causes a lot of problems in interpersonal relationships. So whether that is with your children, where you just don't really know how to relate to them simply because you have never had the chance to live through a healthy childhood and adolescence, you will not know how to respond to your children, how to interact with them. And this is not to say that there is no love. Of course, there is love for the children. But again, you will have trouble showing and expressing the love to the children. It will all sort of be done in subliminal ways. So you might get them their favorite treats to eat, or their favorite drink, or buy them something that you know they like, instead of verbalizing the love to your children. So, love shows up in a different way. Doesn't mean that it's not love. Of course it is, but it is just expressed differently. Another trait is that when you're suffering from PTSD, you are present physically, but emotionally and mentally you are somewhere else. So you can be in a room with people and having a conversation. Another thing that I also noticed with my husband is that the room would be full, we'd all be talking, we'd be having a conversation with guests or friends, and he would be checked out. So he would be there physically, but you could see by the look on his face that he wasn't there. You know, when you look at someone's eyes, you can see whether they are in or not. And 9 times out of 10, he is somewhere else, thinking of a totally different situation, will not be able to always follow the subject of the conversation. And usually it's only when he is, when the subject of the conversation interests him, that is when he will be more mentally and emotionally present. So this is another thing that I have just noticed. I'm not saying that this is a very common trait, but it is something that I have noticed with my husband especially, but I did notice it with myself as well when coming out of this last toxic friendship, was that I would be there physically, but emotionally my thoughts would be somewhere else, or mentally my thoughts would be somewhere else. A fear of intimacy is oftentimes ties into PTSD, where you are emotionally and romantically involved with a partner, but there is a certain fear of intimacy. And when I say intimacy, I'm not just meaning sex. I'm meaning a true connection at a very intimate level, at a very emotional level. You will find that there are a lot of problems involved in this. And this is also one of the reasons why in 2014 I divorced my husband, the codependent, the adult child of narcissistic abuse, because I didn't get it. I just didn't get what he was going through. And there was a lack of that emotional connection, which I'm a very emotional person. I love to be connected emotionally to someone. And when I find that someone shuts down, I find it very difficult, especially in a relationship, to be able to deal with that. So we divorced in 2014, got remarried in 2016, and have been working through that because I now have an understanding. It makes it more clear. Sometimes to gain clarity, you have to go to the confusion and then gain your clarity from there. And that is why to me it has become more clear now. I'm not saying that it's less difficult. It remains a challenge, but it is something that I now understand, that I can grasp. So these are just a few of the traits of PTSD. There's a lot of tension. That is what PTSD is. There's a lot of trauma in your body, in your mind, in your emotions, and a lot of tension goes along with that as well. So You know, the way to get through it, get through PTSD, oftentimes, and I remember this was also said to me when I went looking for help, is that psychologist said to me, you just need to get over it, as I've mentioned in previous videos, get over it, make sure you get enough sleep, and you'll be fine. Well, there is no way you just get over PTSD just by thinking positive thoughts, just by applying positive affirmations. Working through trauma and recovering from PTSD in the aftermath of narcissistic abuse takes a whole lot more than just applying positive affirmations. They will just not cut it. Recovering from PTSD is about journaling, is about being able to tell your story in a safe environment, being able to have that support network around you. It is about coming to terms with what went on, so validating your experiences, your abuse. And it is also meditation, you know, getting back in touch with who you are in your true essence. And another thing that plays into that is conscious breathing. And also EMDR therapy is excellent to retrain your brain. So it's not about just applying those positive affirmations, it is also uncovering your paralyzing thought patterns. Because our thoughts, that's where everything starts. And when those thoughts are not uplifting thoughts, not constructive, when they are very negative, this paralyzes the rest of your body. And that is where you feel that you cannot move on because there's so much paralysis. So in order to deal with that, it is imperative that you look and discover your those underlying paralyzing thought patterns, because when you discover those, then you can start to replace them with new ones through EMDR, which is something that I'm going to start applying in my practice, a simple form of EMDR that I have also used. You know, of course, you can go to a psychotherapist and a psychologist, which is great. Just continue doing that. There's several clients that I help who come to me for talk therapy and go for EMDR to another therapist, which is great. That combination is great. But it is about, EMDR is very valuable when reprogramming your thought patterns and your responses to those thought patterns. And another thing is conscious breathing, because oftentimes, especially when we are suffering from PTSD, we tend to hold our breath most of the time, and we don't even realize that we're doing it. You know, so it is very important to be very aware, very conscious of the way you breathe. And the best way to work yourself through a panic attack, for example, through anxiety, is to become very conscious of your breathing, you know, to breathe deeply so that you feel it, you feel your diaphragm expanding, and then releasing that, the breath as well, is so important. It is something that is very much undermined, underrated, but it is so important to learn how to breathe consciously. Because breathing, you know, when you send oxygen through your body, it goes to your brain. Of course, it's in your bloodstream. It allows you to cope with certain circumstances better. So it is a natural antidepressant, actually, when you are consciously breathing. Another thing, you know, it's not only, when recovering from PTSD, it's not only about doing the outer work, so taking care of yourself, checking yourself in the mirror to see if you're presentable, just upkeeping yourself. That is one side of it. And the other side is, of course, when you are doing the inner work, the inner toxic cleanse. And that is through journaling, that is through breathing consciously. And it is also getting enough rest. You know, even if you have 20 minutes in the afternoon, or when you come back from work, just take the time to just lay on the couch and get some rest, lay in your bed and just relax your body, even if it is for 20 minutes. So rest is important. Also, exercise is important, because when you are exercising, You can also be aware of your breathing. That all ties in together. So when you are breathing consciously and when you are moving your body, you are also releasing the toxic energies from your body. So that is very important. And also treating yourself, whether it is going out for an ice cream, especially with this beautiful weather that we are having right now. Just treat yourself to an ice cream, or treat yourself to, go out and have an iced coffee, whatever it might be, whatever you like. Just treat yourself to that. Be kind and compassionate to yourself. Realize what you have been through, and also realize that you need to have patience with yourself. You need to have compassion, the same way you would have compassion for a young child going through a very difficult time. Or even if a child, it's something simple, if a child falls down and scrapes their knee, you would comfort that child. You would give them a hug and say, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. You comfort them. That is the way you need to treat yourself as well, with compassion, with kindness, and with love. And it's not to say that you do that as a one-off. Introspective work, and so the therapy that you are applying to yourself with all the things that I just mentioned when recovering from PTSD is also about doing it on a daily basis. You have to do it on a daily basis. You cannot do it once and think, oh, well, I did it and it hasn't helped. No. You have to do it on a daily basis to form a routine, because healing is a process. And, if you can get through the first 90 days, that is when you have created a pattern, especially when coming out of this tremendous abuse. You have to realize that it cannot be solved within a matter of weeks. It takes time, and in some cases it is a lifelong process. But just take it every single day, one step at a time, and be committed to your own healing. Be committed to getting into a loving and warm friendship with self. So I hope that has helped some. Again, just remember, we all go through PTSD. It is good to talk about it. For those of you who do not have the support group, I am going to start a support group on Facebook. For those of you who are on Facebook, I will probably do it sometime this week if I have the time, and I will let you all know in the next video. Just to have that group where you can all go to, where you can share your stories, you can get tips from others, and just talk about it. And I realize there are very many support groups on Facebook, very valuable support groups. But because the question has been raised so often, if I have a support group, no, I don't, but I am willing to start one up. So that is all for in the next couple of weeks, but I will let you know. So again, be kind to yourself, and don't forget that you have been running an emotional marathon, and PTSD is very, very real, but so is healing. Take care of yourselves, and speak to you all next time. Love and light to all of you. Bye for now.